The other big news of the day involves two of President Trump's former allies, his former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, and former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to 8 criminal counts, including one for payments to 2 women who have claimed to have had affairs with President Trump. Paul Manafort was found guilty on 8 of 18 counts late Tuesday afternoon. Now, that includes 5 counts of tax fraud, 2 counts of bank fraud, and 1 count of failing to disclose a foreign bank account. A mistrial was declared for the 10 remaining counts after jurors were unable to reach a consensus on those. For a complete legal breakdown, I'm joined now by Jessica Levinson. She's a professor at Loyola Law School, and she joins me via Skype from Los Angeles. Jessica, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I first want to begin with Michael Cohen. He says that he gave hush money to a porn star and a Playboy model, quote, for the principal purpose of influencing the election. And he did it on orders from then candidate Trump. So doesn't that incriminate the president?
Yes, absolutely. Those 2 things that you mentioned, I think, are more harmful to the president legally than, frankly, anything we've seen in a very, very long time. So everything else that happened with respect to Michael Cohen, all of the verdicts that happened with respect to Paul Manafort, those essentially just go to undercutting the idea that President Trump surrounds himself with, quote unquote, the best people. But they don't actually cause any sort of potential legal problems for the president. But Michael Cohen's admission that he paid off these 2 women in order to try and help the Trump campaign, and that he did so at the direction of, it says, a candidate, but we all know that that means President Trump, is hugely problematic, because what he's basically saying is, I entered into a conspiracy with candidate Trump, who's now the president of the United States, to violate federal law.
Right. Now, I guess the question remains, though, how reliable is Michael Cohen? I mean, there have been questions over whether the Mueller team or whether prosecutors believe anything that he says.
Well, I think that the answer is he is not that reliable, and that's why he hasn't gotten, frankly, a better deal. That's why there's reports that he's not really cooperating with respect to this investigation or the Mueller investigation. And that makes me think that with respect to his plea today, when he said, yes, I violated federal election campaign laws, that prosecutors have something significant to back that up. That's more than simply his admission.
Right.
The question, of course, becomes he is the one who says, I did this at the behest of the president. But my suspicion, and again, it's only suspicion, is that there's documentary evidence to show that that's the case.
So he's pleaded guilty to 8 counts. Now all he has to do is await sentencing, correct?
Well, yes, I assume that's rather difficult for him, but he can also try to, again, talk to the federal prosecutors and say, I have information that might be interesting to you. All reports are, again, as we just talked about, that federal investigators really aren't all that interested because they think he has such credibility problems.
Exactly. Now, let's switch gears to the Paul Manafort trial, if you will. The judge declared 10 of the 18 counts a mistrial because jurors could not come to a consensus. So can he still be prosecuted for those in the future? Or at this point, is the prosecution just going to say, look, we're happy with these 8 guilty verdicts?
He could be prosecuted for those. So this is not at all unusual where, this happens in many courthouses throughout the nation every day, where you try someone on 3, 10, 18 counts, and the jury is unable to come to a conclusion on some of those counts. At that point, the prosecutors will try and talk to the jurors and say, what was weighing in your head? What were you thinking about? Why were you unable to come to a conclusion? If the jurors will speak with them. I think that it will partly be a question of polling the jurors. I think it will also be a question of sentencing. Paul Manafort is 68 years old. He could still stand to spend the rest of his life in prison. And then it's also a question of Paul Manafort is facing trial in another federal courthouse for allegations that stem out of the Russia investigation.
Right.
And so prosecutors may wait to see what happens with respect to that investigation.
So could they still then bring the charges up again even after the second trial? They could go back to those 10 counts?
Yes, so I haven't looked at the specific statute of limitations, but my guess is that they would absolutely be free to go back and try those cases. And in fact, that Paul Manafort's attorney would probably say, well, we can't defend two trials at once, so you have to wait on at least one of them.
Right. Okay, so how could Tuesday's ruling in Paul Manafort's trial then affect the broader special counsel investigation moving forward?
So I think that the ruling today with respect to finding Paul Manafort guilty on 8 counts is psychologically and politically important for the Russia investigation and not legally important. So this case that we are talking about for Paul Manafort, this deals with financial crimes that are not directly related to the Russia investigation.
Right.
And so what happened is, which happens a lot, federal investigators are looking at one issue, and that is, did the Trump campaign coordinate with the Russian government? And in doing so, they looked at a variety of the players, like Paul Manafort. They found some alleged wrongdoing, and they referred that to a separate trial. That's the trial we're talking about today.
Yes, right. And President Trump made a notice of that today when he commented on the trial, that this has nothing to do with collusion of the Russia investigation. However, these are still convictions that, so it is the Mueller investigation bearing fruit, if you will.
Yes, I would say tangentially, it's the Mueller investigation bearing fruit. So this fruit grew because of the Mueller investigation, but it's an offshoot of it, if you will. It's a replant. So the president is right that this has nothing to do with whether or not the Trump campaign entered into a conspiracy with the Russian government.
Absolutely. Well, Jessica Levinson, thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you.